Let's move into happy stuff here. It's great to meet you. Thank you for taking a minute out today. And I want to begin our conversation with, we're coming up on the 4-year anniversary of this pandemic we've all gone through. How did you get through the pandemic and how did it change you?
I got through the pandemic originally by being very conscious of it, in the sense that, oh my God, this is something very real that's happening, and all that. But as as it went further and further along, it's not that I didn't believe that there was a sickness going around, but I started to disbelieve uh, what my government was telling me, what other health authorities were saying. I did get my 2 original shots, as almost everyone in Western countries did, but I've never gotten the what they call the booster, and I refuse to ever get another shot about it. And I got through it. It changed me. It made me more. I'd never have been a naive believer in everything my government says, but it kind of put the stamp on it for that. Yeah.
It's weird. Everyone around me got boosters and got everything and still got COVID again.
Yeah.
That's the thing I don't understand. I understand the first shot. I understand we have to have a medical and a calculated response to this. But people kept getting sick, and it's like, I mean, I just went and had a checkup last week, and the doc's like, "Hey, have you gotten any boosters?" And I said, "I got one. I'm done, man. That's it. I'm out." And it's not a conspiracy. It's science. If herd immunity and me getting the initial shot and booster didn't help, I'm out. I'm not going to get jabbed anymore.
Yeah, no, exactly. The joke I had, because you know of some of the conspiracies, the joke I had with my friend was that, wow, I've gotten the 2 shots now. I have 5G built right inside
Yeah,
me.
that's right. I got Bill Gates coursing through my blood. Oh man. So on paper, you're a writer and a podcaster, but if I was to get to the brass tacks of what you do every day, I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of third graders at career day, and one of the kids is curious and says, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How do you answer that child?
I'd say, uh, hey, John, I used to work in the library. You have one in your school here. I used to work as one of those. And now I did that for a long time. And I've stopped doing that now. And now what I do is I write books. They're not books you'll find in your library. They're books for your mom and your dad to read. But I also do this thing called podcasting, which means that I create a kind of like a radio show or something you could go to the internet and hear my voice. And I pick my topics. That's what I do.
So you've been in the library system prior to this. That was kind of what you did for a while.
Over 30 years, that was my career.
Wow. So that
Yeah.
whole time you were around all of those pages and words, did you dream of writing? Were you kind of incubating this dream?
No, I was writing at the time. It's just that
Okay.
I have a lot more time for it now.
Right.
I've been writing since I've been in my mid-teens,
Okay.
and started publishing short stories when I was in my 20s, and then started writing novels. I have published a novel, but I would say because it's self-published. So I've always been writing. It's always been my creative outlet. And in my retirement, I discovered podcasting and really fell in love with it. And I'm now on my second podcast, and I did 2 years with one podcast. I founded it and set it up and everything and built the audience. And now I started another one about 2 months ago, something like that.
Isn't it amazing in our lifetime how far we've come with things like this? Like it used to only be certain broadcast channels would disseminate whatever they wanted to give you,
Right.
and now the people have harnessed this power. You can get technology at not a backbreaking price. You can get all the goods, and you can get out there and you can produce quality content that would be democratized. I mean, because if people are going to listen to it, they're going to listen to it. If they're not, they're not. But we have that levity as people. Isn't that in our lifetime we've come so far?
I love it. There's lots of things about technology that kind of might worry you, or that you think, well, this is useless. It's good for corporations, but it's no good to me. But this is awesome. A person could literally say on Monday, I have an idea for a podcast, and they could have their first episode out by Wednesday or Thursday. I mean, it's crazy, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
good crazy.
It is good crazy. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I just think about even the old modem days and all of the things that we suffered through in the early days.
Screech, screech, screech.
Yes. What were we doing? What is that
Yeah.
sound? Something's dying in the living room.
Did I call the fax machine instead?
Yeah, exactly. Man alive. So when you were in the 3rd grade, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I always liked language a lot. My degrees, I studied English literature in ultimately in university, but I was very interested in language. I know how to speak French, and so I think I used to say I want to do linguistics or language, and I had no idea what that meant. What it probably meant was that you would be a professor of linguistics, but I had no concept of that kind of thing. But
Yeah.
I wanted to do something with language, and I went through and I got English degrees, which were pretty useless to me as practical qualifications for anything, sort of. But yeah, it's something with languages. That's what I would say. I'm very interested in languages and still am fascinated. So
It is fascinating when you think about that. And, having a radio show and dealing with music all the time and talking to musicians, it's amazing that there's all of these languages for all of us to actually communicate with each other. But music is that one thing we all understand. It's the
yeah,
one unifier. It's amazing.
it's funny. It's interesting you say that because I went for a good decade or more not listening to music. Music is one of those arts that doesn't resonate with me as much as it does with a lot of people.
Sure.
And there's an irony there because I've written two biographies, one of both of writers, one of Samuel Johnson, who lived in the 18th century, and one of my favorite writers is Vladimir Nabokov, who wrote Lolita.
Uh-huh.
Both of those writers, uh, they had the same thing. Music didn't affect them. They had very negative things to say about music. Johnson said something like it's kind of a distraction that keeps him from concentrating on his own work or something. So I'm just making that thing
Yeah,
that
yeah.
it just happens that two of the writers I'm interested in also are not as compelled by music as I am. And I would have to say that's true.
What's interesting, I remember the morning Kurt Vonnegut died, and this was way back in the day before, all of these AI machines like Amazon Echoes and all of that were in all the rooms. And I was listening to NPR, and the guy came on there and said, for all of the things that Kurt Vonnegut did in his career, and he was an atheist. The only reason why he would have ever believed in God is because he loved music so much and thought there's no way that this thing that magically happened on this planet was just accidental. And I always remember that of all of the things, and I've heard people say it in a spiritual way. There was a musician I interviewed at one point that was like, I don't go to church, I don't read the Bible, but I listen to John Coltrane every day. And it was like, there's just
Yeah.
there's a power to it yeah, but it's funny how the brain works too, because I'm the type of guy that can ingest audiobooks a lot easier than reading. I love reading, but I don't have the time, and it's a lot easier for me in my job to listen to audiobooks. And I can listen to sports on the radio and I'm totally fine. But my wife, when we listen to something, she's like, "What just happened?" I'm like, "Wait, you didn't hear that?" It's like there's a way that your brain takes things in. And that's what I'm getting to with music. Our brains process this reality in a way that's drastically different from one person to another.
Yeah, no, I that makes sense to me. And also what you're saying about audiobooks makes sense to me too. I've had many people say that to me that audiobooks, by the way, if you just look at it from a business perspective in publishing, they are really taking off.
Yeah.
A lot of people are reading their books like that now. And I put it in quotes, not to say that, oh, it's really fake reading kind of thing. It's reading as much as any other kind of thing is reading. And but yeah, I would have to be on your wife's side because I have a Kindle and that's where I read all my books.
Yeah.
And I like seeing text
Yeah.
and taking it in that way. And that's better for me.
I just read Michelle Obama's book Becoming, and that was 19 hours, which was pretty big for me. and I got through it. But if I try to read that book on my own, I would be into 2025 trying to finish that off. But when I do audiobooks, I just don't have the time, and I tend to kind of mull. I read slow. So whenever I get into an audiobook, I'll even crank that up to like a 1.25 so it's a little faster, and I'm just swallowing up books. It just feels so good because I love reading.
Good for you, man, because that's I mean, it's helping with your literacy. It'd be great if it sort of takes off. It apparently is
Yeah.
taking off with other people. There are lots of people who for years and years never read a single book,
Yeah.
but are now listening to audiobooks just as a lot of people are listening to podcasts. It's
Yeah.
a way of, and that's, it is reading, right? So
Yeah.
that's good. Yep.
Absolutely. So let me ask you this. Um, how did you get into the library system? How did words become your fascination? How did all these seeds become who you are today?
Yeah, well, as I say, I've been writing since I've been in my mid-teens, just for whatever reason. I was a bit of a kind of a nerd, loner kind of thing, and always a very sensitive guy, person. And so words, I eventually started, my first attempt was in journalism. I thought that's what I want to do. I want to write. And I did one semester or trimester of that and dropped out. And then eventually I went, in order to be a librarian, you have to go to what is now called information school. You have to get a master's degree to do that. So I was very interested. I'm also very interested in organization. One of the books I've written is about minimalism and organization and that kind of thing. So that's why I got interested in librarianship. And I started off as a cataloger, and 30 odd years later, I was the director of a university library. So I had a very good career in it. And that's how it all started, from writing to maybe journalism to organization to libraries. That's how it went.
What about the first book? What was the first book that parted the curtains for you that made you either want to read more or write?
By someone else?
Yeah.
Uh, that's a good question. I would say, I mentioned, I'm not sure if you were recording, but I mentioned that one of my favorite writers is the great Nabokov, who's written two great novels, one called Lolita and one called Pale Fire. And I remember in my late teens reading Lolita when I had no sense at all of its infamousness or anything like that, and just being like, fiction can be this good, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And that was a high point. I was writing at that time, or trying to, and very fitfully and not very good. I was looking at my classmates and basing characters on them and stuff like that. Very beginning kind of stuff. But I remember that as a real high point. And of course, those are encouragements along the way, right?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I've always been fascinated at that, especially that period, like with Nietzsche and Dostoevsky and all of those Russian writers. There was a there was a level of I don't know, almost like they were poets. There was an economy of words, there was a depth of thought, there was just a level of them, and I don't know if it was what they were living through at the time, but man, they could get right to the marrow of the bone fast.
Yeah, and that's an important thing. The one thing to remember is that, um, or I always carry this anyway. There are not many really great books or really great writers. Those are rarities. Uh, and if you're doing a lot of reading, make sure you include one of those in there, even just as a contrast to the the mid-level writers that you're reading. And you're right, it does have to do with language and control of language. It's not only about telling a great tale or something like that. You need to know your words as well, and you need to use the right ones.
I remember when I started reading, the first book that I read was Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck. I didn't start reading until I was in college. It wasn't a
Interesting.
part of my childhood, wasn't a part of an environment that I grew up in, and I really, really fell in love with it. And one of my best friends, who's brilliant, genius, really got me into reading and always said the classics are the way to go. So I just swallowed the classics for almost a decade. And it's now, especially with me listening more and more, I'm listening to more contemporary stuff, and there's wonderful stuff out there, mind-bending things where they just stories don't arrive where you think they're going to arrive. There's just so many things that are getting introduced into the world of fiction, and it's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, I agree with you. And it's the same thing. One of my other passions is film, and it's the same sort of thing. What I do find, though, is that there's a lot of the proportion of bad to good is still higher. And maybe that's the nature of art, that only some, there's only going to be 10% that's really great. And the other 90% is, yeah, that's good.
Yeah,
But the 10% at the top, make sure you get some of those in.
yeah,
That's all I'm saying, I guess. Yeah.
exactly. So, who's been a hero for you in your life?
I've had a few. I would mention a literary hero is are those two people I mentioned, Sam Johnson and Vladimir Nabokov. An intellectual hero is Christopher Hitchens.
Yeah.
The famous, I guess, the famous atheist. He spent the last 5 or 10 years of his life debating various bishops and archbishops and everything about the problems with religion. And another one is probably someone you've never heard of, but he was Canadian born. And I actually was lucky enough to have him as a teacher when I was doing my MA in English. And he's a literary critic. So if there's one of your listeners who knows this name, I will personally give them $100. But his name is Northrop Frye. And
Okay.
he basically he kind of redefined literary criticism back in the kind of the 50s, and he was a great teacher and a real inspiration. He was sort of he had a photographic memory, so he had kind of, talk about reading, he had more or less read pretty much everything that had been written, because the assignment we had at the end of the class was read a work and then write an essay that demonstrates that you took this class. So he didn't assign any work, any country, or anything, because he knew that he would have read it already.
Wow, that's wild, man.
He was
So,
amazing. Yeah.
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 So, of everyone alive on the planet right now, if you could meet one person, who would it be? Who would you love to meet?
Jordan Peterson.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
what would you want to talk about?
Well, he covers it all, but as you know, in a lot of corners of our currently woke culture, he's very demonized because of his very straightforward talk about pronouns, and he's gotten into trouble with the trans community and things like that. What I admire him for is his depth of knowledge, his articulateness, and he has one thing about he's a clinical psychologist as well, or used to be. I think he still practices, and he quit his tenured job at the University of Toronto because of this fuss over pronouns and stuff like that. But his one of his main tenets is a, as simple as you can imagine it: be honest.
Yeah.
That's his thing. And I saw an interview. I was just talking to a friend about this the other day. Out of all the accomplishments that he's done, I saw an interview of him, I don't know, a few weeks ago on YouTube or something. And someone asked him, what do you want your legacy to be? What do you want to be remembered for? What do you want people to say about you? And he thought for a moment and he said, he was an honest man.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, you've got a ton of education and degrees and stuff like that, and that's what you want to be known for. I thought, wow, that's pretty something.
I remember my son's 19 now, and when I was an IT director for a home health agency, and they threw a baby shower kind of thing at work, and I remember a gal pulled me aside. I think her name was Selena. I'll never forget this. And she said, I'm going to give you one piece of advice as a parent. Always be honest. Always tell your kids the truth. That's it, you know? And it's totally true, you know? I mean, sometimes you can't really get them engrossed in the details to protect them, but at least you can give them what they need to go off of, you know? Just be honest.
And I'm not a parent, but I can see the value in that, because it's probably easy on the spot to maybe tell a white lie or maybe tell a very dark gray lie just to sort of not upset the kid or just to not get into stuff that you don't want to get into. But you can never regret being honest, because you fall back on it and you say, "This is the truth as I saw it," even to your child.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, uh, Whereas if you lie and that somehow goes astray, and they come back later and say, "But Daddy, what you told me was," then you got to backtrack and re-explain and tell the truth. Yeah,
Yeah, that's
that's it.
it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So of all the things that you've done in your life and become and overcome, what are you the proudest of?
What I'm proud of. I suppose with the writing, I've never gotten a book published by a publisher. I published my own books, four of them. I'm pr proud, not in the biblical sense where I'll be condemned to hell, but proud in the sense that I stuck with it. That I like writing enough and I like creativity enough that I did it for its own sake, rather than that. I've never made any. Maybe I've made $14 in my whole career off the whole damn thing. So I'm happy with that. I like the fact that I like art enough that I stuck with it, even though financially certainly has never done anything for me.
I
Yeah.
think that's the beauty of things is that at the end of the day, you have to do things while we're down here that edify and that make that dream come true, no matter what. It would be nice to be financially backed by something, but at the end of the day, I think there's a lot to be said about human moxie to do exactly what you want to do, no matter what.
It's very true. And it sort of gets back to honesty in a way. I'm not certainly not holding myself up as as an icon or anything like that, but I try my best. And that kind of thing too. There's a lot of people you probably know and heard of. I've certainly met lots of people who, for example, stick with jobs that they just hate, because they just want that pension, they want to maximize, and they really want to do something. I'm not saying everyone needs to quit their job and go to California and sell paintings on the beach or something like that.
Yeah.
But don't forget the things that really drive you, and even in the midst of a job that you hate, persist with them.
Absolutely. So at
Yeah.
the end of the day, everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, all of your readers, everyone that knows you, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
uh, I'm now a very due to some psychotherapy and some really reconsideration of myself. I'm a very centered, honest, very open, uh, calm person. I try my best to be the best person I can to my friends. I'm very selective about my friends, only in the sense that what I mean is that they have to be like me in the sense that they're open to communication. A lot of people are not. A lot of people are just sort of very surfacey. I want my friends to call me on shit as well when I do something wrong.
Yeah.
I want them to be true people to me, as I will call them on stuff as well. And that's how I see myself, as someone trying to be like that anyway. I succeed sometimes, and sometimes I don't. And that's how I see myself. But I would also add to that, I do think of myself as a creative person, and I'm happy that I have that as a value in me, as something that's important. So those are the two elements I would say. It's very important not to be, for example, for me anyway, not to be a creative person, but you don't give a damn or don't have any need for other people. I love people. I'm an introvert, so I like my solitude as well. But I engage with people, and when they're great people, I just spent 2 hours on the phone talking to my friend from Vancouver last night. Uh, just awesome connection, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me ask you this. Let's say we get off this call, time machine pulls up in front of your house. You can go anywhere in the history of human events and you can see one event with your own eyes. Where are you going?
Going to the 18th century, which is when my the guy wrote the biography about lived 18th century. I'd go to probably the early 1750s, when he was compiling the first modern dictionary of the English language. And I'd like to go to the room where he did it and see what he was doing and what his helpers were doing. That's what I'd like to see.
Wow, that's fascinating. So, Wayne, if anyone wants to pick up your books, they want to learn more about you, reach out, anything about your world, where can they do that?
Very easy. My central portal is my name, waynejones.ca, because I'm in Canada, and you'll find links there to my podcasts and to my writing, to books you can buy and stuff like that. That's the place to go, waynejones.ca.
Excellent. Wayne, this has been great, man. Thank you so much for your story and for your passion. I appreciate it, man.
Thanks, Joe. I appreciate you asking me to be here. Thanks.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Take care.